8 minutes into the 10 o'clock hour, Paul Kritz with you, Community Service. And we are beginning today, right now, in fact, kind of a week's worth of festivities. It is the high holy season, election time. And we have but one real election in Del Norte, right?
Yep.
Get your microphone closer to you. She's just obviously a print journalist. There you go. Good. So we've got one of the just one race happening in Del Norte. It is for Harbor Commission. How many positions? How many commissioners?
There are. Wait, how many commissioners
how many
or how
are
many
going?
candidates?
How many how many commissioners are? How many seats are being?
Okay, there are 3 seats open up for election this season. They are currently filled by Harry Adams, Brian Stone, and Wes White.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 5 official Harbor Commission candidates, 6 total, however, because Harry Adams decided to throw his hat into the ring as a write-in candidate.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of at the last minute. It was like last week, something like that.
About 2 weeks ago.
And I'm so used to just sitting around talking to you, I didn't even introduce you. Jessica Saynar Andrews, you know her, you love her, you can't live without her. From the Wild Rivers Outpost? Nope. From Redwood Voice Community News. As of 3 weeks ago? It's all been a blur. I don't know how long it's been now.
It's kind of been an interesting transition, non-transition, because I'm doing what
You're still doing, yeah.
I'm doing what I always do,
Yeah.
just for a different organization. But yeah.
Yeah, and you do, and I have watched you guys working with the Facebook, the chat groups at the end, and all the journalism that's going on behind the scenes. It's really, really cool to see that. So it's a lot of, yeah. So anyway, since we are delving into what is for Del Norters here, just but one campaign, one race happening, I guess 3 races for just one sort of entity here in Del Norte, we figure we'd give every candidate as much possible time as we could to share their views. If it were a more crowded campaign season, don't get used to this. We have a lot of space and 6 candidates to get in and hear what they think about the harbor, why they want a job there. And today, kicking everything off, first thing Monday morning, Mr. Dan Schmidt is joining us. How you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing great, Paul. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful. You showed up early, which is wonderful. You also showed up with props. Now, if you go on Facebook, go to the KFlug page and check out the picture. You've got a big crescent wrench here. It's Dan's Harbor Repair. No job is too big. So it seems like you've got kind of a starting point here for your discussion and what your vision for the harbor would be. What are you thinking?
I think the harbor can become the place where everybody wants to be. Right now, people just kind of drive by it, don't give it much attention. But it can be, and actually was at one time, the economic pearl of Del Norte County. Mm-hmm. It can be again.
Do you think in this kind of post-fishing age that we're in that's possible? Is it a matter of hanging your harbor hat on tourism and getting folks in there that way?
Principally, tourism and identifying what the surrounding community needs and providing that. Mm-hmm. You don't have the same bureaucratic infrastructure that you got to wade through like you would in the city or the county. Mm-hmm. The harbor is its own government, and so it can make a lot of decisions that will happen. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, and you can see them like kind of spelled out right in front of you too. You can see it happen. So before we get into any more of the vision, tell us a little bit about yourself. I first encountered you 2 years ago, I guess, 2.5 years ago.
You put on and Jessica was there too. Yep. Put on the candidates forum over at the Methodist Church for the county supervisor candidates back in 2022. That was very enjoyable. My first experience in a live electronic media scenario.
Wow.
But I enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. We all made it through that one. And so at the time I was the editor of the Triplicate newspaper here in town. And in fact, it's kind of odd that when I first came here 4 years ago, I came into town because I'm a newspaper guy from my early college years. And I said, this newspaper really needs help. And so I found a way to get on there and help that paper out. And I also came and I looked at the harbor. I go, this harbor needs help. And now I'm trying to find my way to help the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all coming together here.
What was there in particular about the harbor that you felt needed help and that you feel now that you can be instrumental in providing that help?
Well, it appeared kind of obvious to me that nothing was happening at the harbor. It was stagnating, and it needed some new life. I saw a lot of potential at the time that was not being pursued. And I think that with the people I've spoken to over the last couple of years, I think there are many things that can happen with the harbor and make it reverse its downward trend. It's had some problems, as you know.
Yeah.
And you got to get through those problems onto something better.
Let me ask, because talking about the downward trend and actually just being here and knowing next to nothing about the inner workings of the harbor, but it seems the opposite to me, that over the last few years that they've really built up a lot in there. They've added a lot of things, and at least to the eye, if you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes, it looks like the harbor is trending upward.
It is. It can be doing it at a much faster pace, but there's a lot of things that were allowed to fall apart in previous years that need to be corrected. The whole Fashion Blacksmith fiasco, where the harbor ended up owing millions and millions of dollars because they neglected their job to maintain and repair the harbor facilities.
You're talking about the Syncrolift and the dredging underneath the Syncrolift.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that should never have happened. And worse is they allowed the very hard to get permits to do that work to expire.
Right.
Somebody wasn't paying attention, and they allowed that to happen. And then they got embroiled in the lawsuit. And from my legal background, I have no involvement in or activity, no participation in it at all. But I'm thinking, that's a case that should never have gotten that far. That's a case that could easily have been resolved without costly litigation and the result of a multi-million-dollar obligation to pay back. That could have been avoided and should have been avoided if the harbor commissioners were paying attention, and they weren't. A lot of other things slipped through. You're probably familiar with, I think, the whole credit card problem.
Yes.
That was actually much worse than what the public knows about.
Right.
And went on for many more years. Where's the Harbor Commission on that? Okay. I've spoken to many commissioners, and I think it's a tragedy that we're losing Brian Stone. Brian Stone had a very disciplined mind, and he was trying to address some of these issues over the last several years. But because it was uncomfortable to deal with, it was embarrassing perhaps, or there weren't any ready solutions that were apparent, he got kind of pushed aside and neglected and isolated. And so he wasn't able to contribute to the board with the energy and ideas that he has. And I certainly hope that and Brian ran for the county supervisor job.
Yes, he did.
I kind of hope that Brian sticks around in some way, and we could tap into his knowledge and experience. On the other hand, Paul, you mentioned that one of the candidates has decided to launch a writing campaign. I'm not going to slam anybody because, I'm not here for that. But that seems to me like more business as usual. Harry Adams, who's the president of the Harbor Board, if he wanted to run again, he just had to file papers and be a candidate.
Right.
But he didn't. He allowed that period of time to lapse. Because he did, the county clerk gave him an extra week to maybe change his mind. He didn't do it. And only now that we have 5 bona fide candidates running for the board does he say, you know what, I don't want to leave. But sometimes you know when it's time to leave. And I think his decision not to seek re-election as a bona fide candidate speaks very loudly to that. We're lucky that there are 3 vacancies. We're lucky that the harbor master and his management style was uncovered and he has resigned. Mm-hmm. That gives the new commissioners, 3 new commissioners, a clean slate to begin the work of repair. And you got some good candidates out there. You know, people have already attacked me for this concept, but Linda Sutter is an outspoken community activist who has put up with a lot of criticism over the years, well-deserved at times, but has continued to make an effort to try to address the problems in government.
Well, the whole thing with the credit cards came out because of Linda, right?
It did. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I think she was the one that alerted the grand jury to the issue and prompted their investigation.
Well, what I'd like to do with my background is, and I need to bone up on it a little bit, is help Linda understand the California Public Records Act so she knows exactly what she can do, how to do it, and how to respond to any foot dragging that she's experienced.
Yeah.
Because I think that the public at large needs to know and have the path cleared for it how to find out what's going on at the Harbor District. I have vowed that I am going to know how every dollar comes into the district, where it's spent, and why.
That's no small thing to assign yourself in an organization like the Harbor, too.
Well, it's not as tough as it could be because they just replaced the chief financial officer with, I don't know David's last name.
David Nagus, I believe.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's done a lot, made a lot of change, or accomplished a lot in just a few weeks he's been there, a few months. I work closely with David to try to give some harbor weight to the work he's doing.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
On that point, I understand there's a harbor commission member who hasn't paid for his mooring fees for a period of 2 years. I don't know if that problem continues. I don't know that it's a current problem, but I've heard that discussed. And that's kind of unconscionable and should not be allowed to go unpursued. So anyway,
so can I ask how you came by that knowledge?
I talked to a lot of harbor commissioners. I talked to people who are, I call them stakeholders in the harbor, who have felt silenced by the way that the commission just kind of ignores their concerns. After a while, Jesse, you may have seen this in your experience, people just get tired of speaking up. They just say, nobody cares. Nobody's going to do anything about it. Why should I stick my neck out?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to stick my neck out. I've done it my whole life. I intend to do it. Now, I did it at the triplicate. I did it as a lawyer, and I'm going to do it as a harbor commissioner. And that is, I'm not afraid to stick no job too big, right?
Are you at all concerned? Because I feel like you had mentioned Brian Stone, I think being alienated to some extent. Are you at all concerned that might happen to you if you're elected?
I think if anybody watching can kind of see the dysfunction in the commission, just kind of in every meeting.
Just watching a video, watching the meeting, being a part of the meeting.
Right. Are you worried about building walls and kind of continuing that sort of fragmentation?
I'm going to tear down walls.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to make everybody, including Linda Sutter, know that I can work with her.
Okay.
And I want to help her become more effective. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? She may get elected.
Sure.
And I may not. So if I'm going to do any help at all, I'm going to have to work with the commission that the voters choose. But I see getting along very well with the other executive staff. I am familiar with, have spoken to briefly the major contractors who are going to secure grant funding. Mike Barr, you probably know Mike.
Yeah.
And Steve Ops, who's kind of like the brainchild.
He's the matchmaker.
Yeah.
What's this?
That was the former harbor master's kind of.
Yeah. He made Bandon.
Pitch.
Was his,
yeah, that's what
Oh, wow.
he said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what he did is he offered to bring a Hyatt hotel to the harbor.
What? Really?
A big one. And the district stalled on it. And he said, screw it. I'll take the idea up to Oregon.
Wow.
And they put it up there.
Oh, that's a good. That's a
Well,
good.
there are a lot of big ideas that are coming along. I have a lot of little ideas, but these guys have big ideas.
Wow.
How do you? I'm sorry.
And the resources to back them up.
How do you? So you mentioned that this Steve, was it Steve Ops that had
I believe so.
pitched a Hyatt hotel?
I believe so. Well, he may have had
Or
his group,
Okay.
his people.
how do you? Because I hear Hyatt hotel and I do not. It's hard for me to imagine something like that at the Crescent City Harbor.
I think Led Zeppelin. the Riot House.
The Riot
Never
House
mind. Yeah, I'm sorry.
on the
That's just-
Sunset Strip. Yeah. But
Well, I'll tell
how
you,
do you? Yeah. How do you? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Jessica,
Yes.
this is the news tip of the week.
Okay.
All right. And that's my very good friend, Doc Bellardi. Do you know who Doc is?
I do know him.
Doc
Know of
knows
him.
what's going on. Everybody loves Doc. He's a wonderful guy. And I enjoy spending time with him. We buy each other lunch frequently. When he buys, we go to the Chart House. When I buy, we're going to Christina's.
Nice.
It works out well for me. Doc knows all these people.
Okay.
He speaks to them 2 or 3 times a week. He's got his fingers on the pulse, the economic pulse of the harbor. He knows what's going on. He will be happy to spend time with you.
Okay.
And in fact, he just called me. He's just now.
Doc's a very interesting. He's been on Jock Talks a couple of times. He's kind of Jock's like standby when a guest falls through. Doc shows up, and he's a very interesting guy. And yeah, he seems like he's in the know across the board. Yeah.
And he's committed to the harbor. He's the one that encouraged me to run. I encouraged him to run, but he felt that his role as like the silent kingmaker in Crescent City
Probably is best suited for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his personality.
How do you? Are you at all concerned about like growing pains? I mean, like adding something like a Hyatt hotel too fast doesn't sound like a good idea
Correct.
to me.
Yeah, it's almost like the groundwork would need to be laid for something that grand,
Right.
you know?
Right.
First of all, you got to understand 2 things. What you're pointing out, Jessica, it's got to be an incremental process. You can't just wave a magic wand and there it is.
You kind of got to get the community used to it too.
Yeah.
That you got to do that, and you have to make sure. Well, this is the reality side of it. Nobody's going to build that hotel unless it makes financial sense.
Right.
So the people that Steve and Mike have contact and Doc have contact with are the ones who have the financial expertise to determine what will be feasible. So it may be you start out with something different, something small. But certainly the property where the RV parks are currently located and where the dredging ponds are located can be put to more productive use.
Absolutely.
And let's make it happen. Let's make the Crescent City Harbor the place where people want to be. And you have retail and dining opportunities, just all kinds of desirable features that somehow Crescent City and Delaware County hasn't provided. I mean, God gave us these wonderful trees, the ocean and the rivers. we have to do our share to bring people here and make them spend some money.
We have. It's just a community. I think we've had, and I don't feel like we're still in it, but we a long hangover after the collapse of the resource economy, and I don't think we could get our heads around that just as a community. For a couple of decades, it seemed like we were holding on to this. No, we're still a fish and logging community. Damn it!
I kind of feel like we're doing a better job than, say, Curry County, for example.
In the last 10, 15, it seems like, people have seen like the town turn around as Beachfront Park sort of comes together, as the harbor sort of coalesces after the last tsunami, and then people have kind of bought into, it's tourism, it's traffic through here that's going to keep this community alive.
But a lot of that development is grant driven at the moment, and so like at some point, how I think one of the things that, and I've heard this at the Board of Supervisors level, but like government has got to make it attractive for investors to invest, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Harbor Commission kind of dipped its toe into the Creed proposal. They didn't go all in. I think the original proposal was like a $30,000 proposal. They decided to go with $10,000 instead. As a single harbor commissioner, what would your role be in trying to encourage that investment, or do you think that kind of investment should be encouraged at all?
Well, being in business, being a newspaper guy, being an attorney, and being just the kind of an outcast that I am, you learn that you have to give the people what they want. And you sometimes have to inform them as to what they need. When you coordinate need and want, you create a desire that can be fulfilled with proper planning, teamwork, outreach programs to keep the public informed, making sure you bring the outside voices into the discussion so all viewpoints are heard. It may be, you look over at the Front Street Park, it may be that you hear 2 or 3 people saying, I want a place to walk my dog. And bing, there's a dog park, right?
Right.
And that may satisfy an important part of the community. So the same is true.
It was a different take for the dog park. And it wasn't just a couple of people going, The dog park was the way the city drubbed up community buy-in for Beachfront Park, because it was the first. They listened to the community, listened really closely,
and it was
went, all right.
years and years ago.
Yeah.
It was way before it was after the master plan was created, but it was way before the pump track and amphitheater and everything else started even become an idea.
But this goes back to what you were saying about an entity like the city kind of listening to a community, and then also using what they hear to sort of drive the narrative itself, because the dog park was a lot of people's buy-in to, we're going to do a whole bunch of things with Beachfront Park, and the first thing they cared about was the dog park, and then that was the entree into that.
And the bump track is a similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one park designer has referred to the city's efforts to put too many Christmas ornaments in the park, and I can understand that.
I can see that, yeah.
But
again, it's going after that grant funding that you have to do and getting that buy-in from the public, right? You've got to have these things that are sexy and capture attention.
What's your kind of this is kind of on topic, but kind of not really. So like one of the things that has been discussed at the Harbor Commission, the Harbor District level is is the Harbor District being an operations and maintenance port for offshore wind. Offshore wind.
Right. Before we jump into this, let me do something.
Roger, I have to call you later. Okay.
Let me do something radio-wise here. It is 10:33. You're tuned to KFUG Community Radio. Paul Kritz, along with Jessica Sanar Andrews, and we are speaking with Dan Schmidt, who is running for Crescent City Harbor Commission. There, thank you. I just needed to get that out the way.
Jessica, could you run that last?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Wes White has talked about this. Brian Stone has also brought this topic up as well. I don't think the other commissioners have really talked about it, but it's the idea that it's actually in the strategic development plan that Mike Barr has been working to update. But it's the idea that the Crescent City Harbor could become an operations and maintenance port.
Yeah, Brian is really behind that. He has I would call it a fairly complete understanding of what that project represents. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a brother who spent 30 years in the electrical utility industry as an administrator, and the scope of the proposal is enormous. Mm. I think these proposal can generate enough electricity for a good portion of California. Okay, and that would break our dependence from Pacific Power, which is an Oregon-based business,
right,
and allow us to produce our own electrical energy, which is going to be important in the future, because as the move to eliminate fossil fuels and gasoline and all that, there's going to be a lot of electric vehicles driving up and down Highway 101. They're going to need to recharge, and we got to have the juice to do that. And that could be a reason to come here for many people. Mm. But as far as the harbor being a maintenance center, well, I spent a lot of time in the Channel Islands area in Ventura County, and there's a lot of offshore oil rigs there. And I had a buddy who worked on the platforms, and they would helicopter them out to the platform. They'd mm-hmm. spend a week and bring them back. Very good paying jobs, by the way, very good. And do the repairs and parts and meals and anything else that the crews out there needed. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want to see Crescent City become a Bethlehem Steel type town or anything like that. I think our harbor, our community, our environment is too precious to allow it to slip into the maritime equivalent of a auto salvage yard. We don't want that. And but I think there's plenty of room to support and service the offshore wind power, if that's what the public decides it wants to do.
Right.
Up in Oregon, there's something on their ballot trying to block those wind power generators from going in.
Yep.
So that same movement may make its way down south to California.
Sure.
Oh no, I'm sorry. No, go right ahead.
No, I don't.
I got one.
Okay.
I got a question. So
great.
Help us understand. Like, you're elected. Boom, it happens magically. Presto, you're magically the democratic process. What happens day one for you? Where do you begin?
Well, there's a precious window of opportunity between election day mm-hmm. and the day that we take office, mm-hmm. first meeting in December, in which the winning candidates are not bound by the Brown Act. Mm-hmm. You know, when you have,
really, you're not bound until you meet, until you're sworn in.
You're not sworn
in. Sworn in.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Well, now the thing that I look at is the winning candidates. There needs to be an opportunity for each candidate individually and perhaps collectively to kind of understand where everybody's coming from, mm-hmm. reach some kind of an understanding of where they want to go. Talk to the executive staff, Dave and Mike,
sure.
Find out where they want to go with it, so that you can kind of smooth out the bumps in the road before the journey actually begins. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that on day one, you can have a new bylaws already drafted. That, I don't know if you're familiar with the current one.
I know they need to be worked on.
Why? What's wrong with the bylaws as they exist now?
Well, very poorly considered.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't address the problems that we now know we have. I think the president of the commission's duties, which are outlined in the bylaws, need to be clarified. I think there needs to be a sharp break between what the harbor master does and what the commission does in terms of authority, so that you don't have this blurring of responsibilities, which leads to, oh, that's his job, he can take care of that.
Right.
I'll do this. So, new bylaws, review the policies and procedures. Think of a way to improve public participation. Get people to the way they run their meetings, the public comments portion.
Really bad.
How's it different? How's it different from like other meetings?
It's not organized.
Uh-huh.
People just kind of go to the podium and say what they want to say, but they don't identify themselves unless they're reminded to identify themselves.
Because it's basically like just a little room.
And there's
full of
a
people.
dialogue between there's a dialogue between the commissioners and the public, and there really shouldn't be.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Because it leads to like what? A lot of non-agendized sort of exchanges. Yeah.
Well, everybody wants to get their views out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's not a mechanism to allow that to happen, they're going to be frustrated. And Linda is probably the primary offender in a lot of that, because Linda has a lot of good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like a whistling tea kettle. You sometimes have to give Linda an appropriate outlet for her thoughts.
Hello. Hey, how you doing? All right.
Not necessarily as a commissioner,
Right.
but as an interested member of the public.
Right. And I also feel like it's been kind of my experience that some members of the commission feel the need to respond to some of the things that are said at the podium, and I don't. Well, okay, I do have a question, actually. One of the things that I have thought is needed is training on how to be a commissioner. What are your thoughts on that?
100% in agreement. That magic window of opportunity between election day and being sworn into office, there should be significant contact with the executive staff, including the staff attorney, to go over what their duties and obligations are, the limitations on their authority, what are they allowed to do and what are they not allowed to do, so they know. Now, our bylaws say that the meetings are governed by what's called the Robertson Rules of Order. Now, we've all heard of Rogers Rules of Order. Robertson's Rules of Order are different.
Sure.
They're simpler, and they're geared toward public agency.
Sure.
Now, if you're like me, you learn. I went to, I don't know if you know this, but I went to YouTube University. Okay? That's where I get my education in many subjects. And I got on YouTube or got on Google and looked up Robertson's Rule of Orders, and I sent over to a couple of YouTube sites. And it was explained, and it makes a great deal of sense. And it would address the problem that you talked about. How do you keep the public involved, but keep the meetings in order?
Yeah.
How easy is it to watch? I've heard it's difficult to watch. I've never watched a harbor commission.
It is not easy to
How do you
in.
go about doing it?
Well, I participate via Zoom, but the problem I think is they're the way their meeting is set up. It's really difficult for me to understand some of the things that are said, and if you got kind of input from the audience, that tends to, you get a lot of like voices talking at once.
Gotcha.
I don't
Right.
know
If
if
you
that's
know
something that you've experienced.
Yeah, and oftentimes those voices are hostile.
Very much.
And so it takes on the kind of a barroom environment atmosphere.
Wow, yeah.
Angry people barking from the back row of the audience what they want done.
One of our youth reporters wrote a piece not too long ago about a Harbor Commission meeting, and that's what basically the piece was about. It was about this dysfunction of the meeting more than anything that was actually said in it.
Well, Harry, bless Harry's heart. He wants to be he wants to come back on. He's coming in as a write-in candidate, but he's the president.
Yes.
The burden of meetings functioning properly falls on his shoulders. And so he needs to look in the mirror to identify where that problem began. So.
All right. Well, we should think about wrapping up. We're closing in on the 11 o'clock hour,
Okay.
and we've got the parade of candidates. So I
That's
don't know.
right.
I just wanted
there-
to plant that out there. We've got plenty of time left, so please.
Are there, I don't know if I actually asked this, but what do you feel the role of commissioner, as either as an individual or as a collective, what do you feel that it should be?
The commission makes decisions as a collective body, a majority of 3. And as we all hear, you got to learn to count to 3, because you're not going to get anything done unless you have 3 people in favor of that. So you got to listen very carefully. How is it that I can get support for what I believe needs to be done, what the public needs to be done, and still have 3 votes? Because there are going to be people who oppose any of those ideas or changes because they're locked into the status quo.
Sure.
Or they have other interests that influence their decisions. So individually, I want to let people know that I'm accessible. In my little flyer I handed out, I put my home phone number, my cell phone number, inviting people to call me. I expect that people will call me, and would look forward to talking with them like I enjoy talking to you folks here. I think that's how you find out what people want. And Doc has an idea that I don't entirely disagree with. He thinks the Harbor District ought to have a little newsletter that's available, and that would probably help get the word out that way.
Sure.
So there are things to do.
Great. Anything else that
Yeah.
you would like to add that you feel we haven't discussed, or that?
Well, I haven't talked about what I think can and should happen, but I think some of the things that make a Harbor Commission member effective is that they are curious people. They have a desire to find out things, to probe below the surface. You have to want to know things. Some people don't want to know anymore. I know enough already. I don't need to know anymore. And that's exactly the opposite attitude that someone should have. A desire to know, a desire to serve, and a desire to improve and make long-lasting improvements. And as a lawyer, I'm certain, as a defense attorney, I have had many thousands of clients. Among them were some very unpopular cases, very unpopular causes, that I nevertheless still had to do my job. My job was to protect the interests of my client in a very hostile environment. And keep your eyes focused on the road ahead. As a journalist, it's easy to just kind of gloss over what's going on. But as you know from personal experience, sometimes the best stories occur after you've dug down burrowed into the ground. Or using the analogy of the harbor, get below the water line to see where the bubbles are coming out of. Because you can't know how big the problem is until you know what the problem is. You sometimes have to go down deep to find it. And so as a journalist and as an attorney, I have the life skills and passions to pursue the detailed knowledge that's necessary to help the Harbor Commission. And I think if other commissioners were equally curious, they would be better commissioners.
Right on.
Right.
All right. Dan Schmidt, running for Crescent City Harbor Commission. Of course, the election's coming up, the 5th of November? And Oh, I didn't. Oh, you had this. I thought this was actually written. So he's got a great little flyer here, actually. It's got the little handwritten message at the end. I love that.
Yeah,
That's sweet.
the message is, please call me. My
That's nice.
cell phone number is 760-953-5321. And I look forward to hearing from everybody who has some ideas on how we can make the harbor better.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And thank you, Jessica.
Oh, you're welcome.
We have just a few, about 12 minutes away from 11 o'clock. Coming up in the 11 o'clock hour, I do expect, I believe it is Annie Namer who will be joining us, and we'll be continuing our cavalcade of harbor commissioners, folks who want to help the harbor. And Dan Schmidt, sort of the inaugural candidate for this week's festivities, as we highlight the only election involving live candidates, right? Yes. We've got other things to vote about in Del Norte, but this is the one that matters for the humanity of us all. And the harbor, which is a remarkable gem that we have in our community, a wonderful resource to have. So, Dan, thanks again for joining us. This interview will be, we have recorded it. It'll be posted on the KFUG YouTube channel, so you will be able to listen again. And he's taken the giant tool away.
No job is too big.
No job is too big. Right on. So, so check out our KFUG page to see that as well.
Thank you.